So when you see this word, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it this? Most naturally, when you see the word goat, your mind would take you to such a farm animal, or maybe not. Maybe it's something different. Oftentimes today, at least in the world of sport, goat has come to mean something like this. When I think of GOAT, I think of these three men, the greatest of all times. It's become an acronym. Now, when I was a kid growing up, GOAT meant a very bad thing. If you were the GOAT of the game, that meant you did something poorly, that you cost your team the victory, that something went wrong and you were responsible for it. But it doesn't mean that today, I think, in most parts. But I'm interested, apart from farm animals and athletes, when you hear the word great or greatness, what is it that comes to mind? Like when you think of greatness, what constitutes greatness? Now, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes. I want to explore this, and for our friends on live stream, in order for you to be able to hear it, we're going to need somebody to help me with the microphone. So Effie, I would love it if you would come and help. Let's give Effie a big hand. You're going to play the role of Craig today. And when someone has an idea or has something that they want to share, they're going to raise their hand and you're going to go to them as quickly as possible. But we want to collectively get an understanding as to what greatness is. I'm interested as to what you think. I've told you what I think when I hear the word. What do you think? Anybody have any ideas about what constitutes greatness?
Walking out of a tomb. Walking out of a tomb.
From death to life. Are we on with our mic? We good? Cut us up just a tad.
Walking out of a tomb.
Excellent. Okay. I would say defeating death is pretty great. What else?
Being the best at your chosen field, what you choose, being the very best.
Being the best at what your chosen field is. Okay. Elijah.
Giving it the best you got.
Giving it the best you've got. Okay, good. I want you to think about greatness as you pursue it, because none of us set out to be mediocre. We may end up there, but none of us aspire to mediocrity. We want to be great. So when you're thinking about what greatness means to you, that's what I want to hear.
I think of it as like extreme excellence. Like it's not just excellent, but it's beyond.
Beyond excellent.
Like almost like there's nobody in comparison to you.
Okay, and that could take a variety of different shapes and forms. Yeah?
What comes to mind is Samson, bringing everything around you down.
Say that one more time, Courage.
What comes to mind to me is Samson. Samson.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, conquering everything around you, like when you push the whole building down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a feat of strength.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think of when you think about being great yourself? Yeah, Jay.
Great success from hard work, dedication that inspires others.
Great success from hard work that inspires others. That's good. Good. Just a few more. Good job, Effie. We're making our way.
I think of being aware of living to your potential, like what, just seeking, to me it's me trying to seek God's purpose for me.
Okay. Thanks, Raquel. One or two more.
I think greatness is consistently defying the odds, to consistently pushing the limit, consistently doing what thought couldn't be done.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Lynn?
I think it's very important to be a great role model
Okay.
for our children. And I'm going to say my mother was a very great role model for me growing up by making me go to church on Sundays, and it brought me to where I am today. So I think it's really important to be a great role model. My husband is a great role model to my children. He's a great father. So being a great parent.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, so I'm sure each of you have brilliant other ideas, and I would love to hear them afterwards. Thank you, Effie. Nice job. But if we don't get moving, we're going to be well into the 12 o'clock hour before we're done. And I'm sure on Mother's Day, it would be a terrible thing for me to keep many of you late. So I think we aspire to certain things. I think each of us have, when a microphone is not in front of our face, I think there are things that we think about when we think about greatness. But oftentimes, I'm not sure if the way that we think about greatness is the way that Jesus thought about greatness. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, we've been in this series, this is week number 5 of a series called Christian, and we've been trying to figure out what this word means. Because I think over time it's come to mean different things to different people. And so what I was wanting when I created the idea for this series is for us to have sort of a place where we were settled and we could understand sort of a defining description of what Christian is and what it isn't. Because I think sometimes we think, well, Christian is just something you're born into. It's what your parents were, it's what their parents were. It's kind of just like a family you're born into. And then I think some of us think, well, being a Christian is about what one believes. What series of beliefs, creeds, doctrines one adheres to or thinks is right. The problem with that is there's so many different understandings about what it means to be a Christian in terms of belief. So who gets to choose who's right and who's wrong? Is it right thinking or is it right action? Is it what I do or is it what I think? Is it an exclusive club where only certain people are welcome, or is it radically inclusive and everybody is welcome? See, these are the things we're wrestling with over the course of the last month. And I think as we've sort of looked week by week at different aspects or elements of the way that Jesus talks about what it means to follow him, is we're gaining a little bit of clarity as what it means when we say the word Christian. And so today we're going to look at what it means to be great. What it means to aspire to a life of greatness. And if you have a Bible and you want, you can turn with me to Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9. That's where we're going to be camped out. Verses 33 through 37. But in order to get us up to speed as to where we find ourselves, I want to give you a little bit of background as to what's going on before we hit this selected passage. Now, Jesus, prior to this passage we're going to read, Jesus and 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, have gone up a mountain. It has become termed the Mount of Transfiguration because of what happened on top of that mountain that day. I won't go into a great deal of detail, but there was this amazing experience that Jesus and his 3 disciples had while the other 9 were at the bottom of the mountain. There was this transformation that occurred that the scriptures say that Jesus' garments became dazzlingly white. He was almost unapproachable in how he looked. And as he experienced this transformation in front of them, there were 2 other dudes that showed up. Does anybody remember who they were? Moses and Elijah. If I had a Reese's peanut butter cup, I would throw it at you, Rick. I got one in my office. Come see me later. Moses and Elijah, and they had this sort of mountaintop experience. Peter wanted to set up booths and stay there forever, but as soon as he got started in the process of wanting to hang out on top of that mountain, Moses and Elijah disappeared. And so it was this incredible, awesome experience, and as they make their way down the mountain, the very first thing that happens to them is what? They run into this guy who has a son who is possessed by evil spirits. And while he and the other three were on top of the mountain, the Father and his Son were at the bottom, and they were begging the other disciples to help cure or deliver this boy from his demons, but they couldn't do anything. They couldn't help him in any way, shape, or form. And when Jesus gets to the bottom, the Father comes desperately asking for help, and he says, if you can, please help. And Jesus says, if you can. And he casts the demons out, and the boy is made well. And long story short, he and his Father are restored. Jesus and his disciples, all 12, go to home base, which is a small town. Now I'm really going to give out a peanut butter cup if you get this. Jesus' home base was a small town in the northern Galilee, the northern area of Israel, to a place called, you said it, I heard it, Capernaum. Capernaum. That was Jesus' home base. They're going back. Now, along the way, Jesus is trying to tell his disciples this is the second of 3 times that he's going away, that he's going to die. But also that one day he'll be resurrected as well. It's going to be bad news briefly, but then eventually it's going to be incredible news. He's going to conquer and defeat death. But they don't understand. They didn't understand it the first time. They don't understand it this time. They won't understand it the third time. They're scratching their heads. They don't know what to do with the information. So you would think if you have a question that needs clarification, you would ask, but they're embarrassed. They don't know the answer. They've heard this before, but they don't ask him a question. Instead, what they do is they begin arguing about what? About who on that team is the GOAT. Seriously, Jesus is pouring out his heart. He is telling them, listen, very soon I'm going to go away from here. I'm going to die. But in 3 days I will rise again. And instead of asking him for some explanation, they just turn to each other and start arguing about who is the GOAT among them. Now, this is funny because it's not the first time they've had this argument, and it won't be the last time they have this argument. They are caught up in this notion of what makes for greatness. Can you imagine, like, just the back and forth that would have been going on with these disciples? Peter would have been talking about how he was named the rock, right? That Christ, upon his statement of confirmation and faith, nicknamed him Petra, Peter, the rock. And they would have been saying to him, yeah, rock for short for rockhead, for all the things that you're always doing. And he reminds them, yeah, you remember when that storm on the sea and the winds were blowing and the water came over the boat? You remember how when Jesus invited me and not you to walk on the water? And they reminded him, yeah, you got about 2 feet, and then because you were so afraid, you started to sink. You imagine the back and forth that was going on about greatness? They were arguing. And so finally, when they get to Capernaum, Jesus is trying to sort of out them. He wants to know, hey, fellas, I couldn't exactly make out what you guys were talking about on the way here. Do you think you could tell me what your discussion was about? And this is the story, verse 33. He says, what were you discussing on the road? Crickets. They didn't answer because they had been arguing about which of them was the greatest. They were embarrassed, and they should have been. This was a very sacred time that Jesus was wanting to have with his closest friends. They didn't get it, and instead they changed topics and began discussing something that seems crazy, seems silly, that they would be having this discussion. You see, Jesus is intending to teach them a lesson. It's going to unfold in the next few verses. He knows now, and he knew then. He just wanted them to own up to it, but they wouldn't. But he knew what they were talking about. They'd been talking about it before. In fact, it seemed to be on their mind quite a bit. And I think probably, if truth be told, it's on our minds quite a bit too. what makes for a great life? If I don't have a picture of what it looks like, how am I going to carve out a path to get there? In order to know what greatness is, I have to see it. I have to understand it. And then once I have a clear picture, I can take action steps and move towards it. But until I clear up the confusion, I'm only going to continue to argue and debate about what it even is. And Jesus is about to give them quite a clear understanding as to what it is. This is what he says. He says, whoever wants to be first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. But I don't want that. Do you? Whoever wants to be first, I want to be first. I want to win. I want the medal. I want to be great. I want the championships. I want 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. I want that. Don't you? And Jesus is playing with their mind. He says the person who wants first must come to a place where they have to be willing to take last and become the servant of everyone else. That means not just serve the people it's easy to serve, not just bless the people you like. He says, whoever wants to be first must take last place. This is an act of submission. This is an act of humility. And then he says, and be the servant of everyone else. And then he put a little child among them. And taking the child in his arms, he said to them, anyone who welcomes a little child like this on my behalf welcomes me. And anyone who welcomes me, welcomes not only me, but also my Father who sent me. In first century, children had no status, no standing. They had nothing to offer anybody. It wasn't like, oh, look at that cute little child. It was like they should be seen and never heard. They had little to no value in that society. There was nothing that they could offer anyone to better advance their status. And so when Jesus, after hearing their discussion about greatness, decides that he wants to realign their understanding by welcoming a child, and he says, those who welcome this one without standing, without status, without title, without power, without authority, without anything that could make your life better or easier, when you welcome them into our circle, you're welcoming me. That must have blown their ever-loving minds. He was taking this child and he was making an example to them to say, when you look at a person who can offer you nothing in return and welcome them into your community, that's when you're at the beginning of understanding what it means to be great. Welcoming children into their circle and equating it with welcoming him would be a major step in helping them to understand something about what it means to be great. Greatness comes when you include people in your life who can do nothing to make your life better. Now, I want you to think about the relationships you have and the relationships you're trying to form and the ones you prize as most important. And I want you to think about the value that you place on them. What he's saying here is that humility and service is the pathway to greatness. Now, the reason that this was so confusing to them and the reason that they didn't really get it from the start was because humility in their day, it was associated with defeat. It was not a term that they would have embraced. One of the prized values of their day was the love of honor. And I don't think it was just in their day. I think it is also in our day as well. Everything in life was a calculated move for the people who lived in that day to elevate their status. Every step, every action, everything was a step that was calculated to determine, how is this going to advance my life, my career, myself? How's this going to make things better for me and mine? So the idea of being humble was something that would have been rejected out of hand. But not so with Jesus. What constitutes greatness? Really, it depends on who you ask. And that's why I asked you earlier. Because whether or not you're used to answering that question, you're used to thinking about it. And I wonder if the answer you gave here would be the same answer that you gave outside of here in a different environment, at home, at work, in the community. Sometimes when we're in church, we give churchy answers. We give the answers that we think the people around us want to hear. But it's not really what's going on inside of us. We're pursuing something different. And that's why I think when I asked the question, what constitutes greatness, I asked it because I wanted you to think about it. Not even because you had the answer ready, but it's because it's what you're going to give your life to when you leave today. And when you wake up tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. I think if you were asking Jesus about the idea of greatness, I think he would say something about willingly foregoing your own status, your own standing, your own need to be first, and using your influence, whatever influence you might have, to elevate other people, to put other people ahead of yourself. For some of you, you understand that value because when you've done it, it makes you come alive. You know the value of pouring out your life on behalf of another to elevate their life in some way, shape, or form. There is mutuality. When you bless other people, it is a blessing to you. But until you do it, you'll never know. You will never have any idea the value of humility, of humble service, of continual sacrifice. It's what our moms, the best of our moms, do on a daily basis when raising children. They don't always get it right, but the idea behind raising children is that you're going to elevate them ahead of your own need, ahead of your own life. You're going to sacrifice things that come at great expense to you because you want them to thrive. You want them to have a better life. And that's really what all of us should be thinking according to Jesus, because when we think about the name Christian, it should mean something different than the way greatness gets defined in the larger culture and world. I'm all for titles and victories and championships and wins and medals and first places. I'm all for it. I think do the best you can with what you have to accomplish the most that you can. But somewhere along the way when you're doing that, be humble. Know what got you to where you are. And when you don't, when you fail, when you finish second, third, 10th, or last, understand that part of the struggle, part of the process of getting to greatness is learning how to lose well too. It's learning how to be humble in victory and also in defeat. There's no shame in that. When we accomplish what we accomplish, we do it because we try hard to set a goal and achieve that. But if we don't accomplish that, we just learn things along the way that help us to reframe what it is that we need to do when we're trying again the next time. I don't really know what greatness is for each of you. I kind of think that's between you and your Maker. But I think as you think about it, when you leave this place and in the days to come, I hope that you will consider what Jesus did when he was trying to teach his disciples. See, they couldn't figure out what greatness was. They thought it was about sort of stepping on one another to get to the top. But Jesus welcomed a little child who could do nothing for them and said, when you welcome this little child, when you get down on your knee, when you sit on the ground and you play with this child, it's almost as if you were welcoming me. So, when you think about using the word Christian and applying it to yourself, I think the best idea we can have is to use Jesus' definition. Because once we start to change those definitions, the word Christian becomes muddied. It becomes different from the way that it reads in the Gospels. And a lot of us are chasing a lot of things and attaching God's name on it, Jesus' name on it, and I think at the end of the day, we should be very careful about that. I think that everything that we do, everything that we say, it should be in alignment with what Jesus teaches us about life and what it means to be a follower of his. So I think Jesus defines greatness as being willing to forego your own status for the sake of another, humbly serving the least of these and welcoming anyone into your community as if you were welcoming me. So as we close, I just want you to think about this. Who is unwelcome in your world? What groups of people, individuals of people, do you look at and think poorly of just because they are in that group? Are they welcome in your world or are they not? Jesus says, when you welcome even the least of these categories of people into my world, you're welcoming me. So turn that around and say, what happens when we refuse welcome? We're refusing the welcome of Jesus in our midst. I want you to think about that because I think greatness is radically inclusive. I don't think it's exclusive. I think greatness welcomes everyone. Greatness serves everyone. Greatness is about that, and Jesus taught his disciples that, and he teaches us that too. And I want you to think about that. And since our kids are coming in to hand out roses, I think it's about time for me to finish. If you would join me, let's pray. Lord, I must confess that when I think of greatness and a life of aspiring to greatness, sometimes I don't think about the way that you define it. But I want to, because I believe that how you define it will lead to life and life to the full, or else you wouldn't have defined it that way. So I ask, in all of our pursuits and whatever it is that we're trying to do to be the best at, I ask that you would help us to remember a little humility, a little sacrifice, and an open arm, wide welcome to all of those who can do nothing to elevate our status, who could do nothing to advance our cause, who could do nothing for us, and yet they exist anyway. Help us to welcome even the littlest and the least as we were welcoming you. In Christ we pray. Amen. Okay, so here's the instruction about our roses. I would love, first, if all of our kids, now, you need to hear this instruction. However many children are in your family, that's how many roses your mom gets. Okay? So, we'll let our youngest come first, and then after they come through, we'll let our older and older until all of our moms have had a chance to be honored. So come on up and get some roses. And as you're coming, on the way out, there's a sign by the door that has a very special message to our moms. I would love it if you guys would get a picture. Somebody maybe will be there with a phone to take a picture of you and your mom to celebrate this Mother's Day, okay? So have at it. Take some roses. And when you hand it to your mom, tell her one thing that's so great about her. All right, the rest of you guys can come. After everybody's finished, we'll say a closing blessing. Older kids, even adults, come. If your mom is here, you'll see your mom. Come get some. Hey, John. Please feel free. So here's the deal. As we get our last flowers taken, there are some lovely ladies who are here who did not get a flower, and I do not want any of you to leave before you get one. So I'm going to be up here at the end when everybody's dismissed, and I want you to come and get one or two or however many are left. The goal of our little exercise here is that none of them stay here. So I want every lady who is here today to come and receive one, okay? And then if your children weren't here to offer you that flower and somehow you got overlooked, I want you to come and I will hand it to you personally myself. Okay? So if you would stand. So guys, thank you so much for joining us on this Mother's Day. Thank you for joining us live stream. I pray that your time here was insightful, enlightening, and that it would cause something about the way in which you engage your day today and tomorrow to be different, to be better, to lead you into your best life. With that being said, be people of grace and peace. God bless you guys.